Hello there. Welcome to the September edition of the National At-Home Dad Network's free webinar series. My name is Matt Strain. I want to thank everybody for coming here. I know many of you will be watching this on recording as for whatever technical difficulties, we are not able to broadcast live to Facebook as we usually do. I apologize for the inconvenience, but as I'm sure everybody knows, technology is always fun. This month, I'm being joined by Linda Flanagan. Linda's a freelance journalist, a researcher, and former cross-country and track coach. A graduate of Lehigh University, she holds master's degrees from Oxford University and the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, and was an analyst for the National Security Program at Harvard University. She's a founding board member of the New York City chapter of the Positive Coaching Alliance and a 2020 to 2021 advisory group member for the Aspen Institute's Reimagining School Sports Initiative. Her writing on sports has appeared in The Atlantic, Runner's World, and on NPR's education site Mindshift, where she's a regular contributor. She's a mother of three and a lifelong athlete, and she lives in New Jersey. More importantly, she's also the author of the book, Take Back the Game, How Money and Mania Are Ruining Kids' Sports and Why It Matters. This book is a close look at how big money and high stakes have really transformed youth sports, turning what used to be healthy, fun activities for kids into all-consuming endeavors that are putting stress on kids, it's putting stress on their parents, as I'm sure a lot of you can understand. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Linda and let her give you a little background, and then we're just going to have a nice conversation. So by all means.
Well, thank you, Matt, and I appreciate your invitation to appear on your podcast. So why don't I start by talking about why I wrote the book? You know, as you said in my little bio, I have a long history in athletics and in writing. Kind of like it was sort of like a perfect storm of my interests and career pursuits. Kind of ended up creating the book. In that I have been an athlete my whole life. You know, as a competitive. I played on my varsity softball and tennis teams in high school, and I ran in college, and I ran in graduate school. Been a competitive runner. Still to some extent. I have children and have seen the youth sports world from that angle of, the hype surrounding it from when they're very young. And I've witnessed it as, I think, most alarmingly as a coach, like from day one when I started coaching cross country because running has done so much for me, and I wanted to encourage the next generation of young people to develop a love for the sport because it is such a wonderful, healthy habit. And I quickly was disabused of the idea that sports are for, actual development and growth. They're actually for, access to getting into a better college. It's all about the next thing. It's not about what sports can do for you as a person. It's where they can get you, which I found pernicious and wrong.
Yeah.
So those, and so these ideas have been percolating in my head for 20 plus years anyway, because I coached for 17 years. And I'm also a writer, so I was able to poke around in some of these subjects, these problems that I saw that I felt weren't really being talked about or addressed in a way I thought was satisfactory, and was able to get some stories published in various outlets on sports. And then that kind of one thing led to another, and it resulted in a book. So, yeah. I wore a lot of different hats in writing this book.
And I will point out, we are actually giving away a copy of your book. The National At Home Dad Network does a monthly free book giveaway. Usually we try to make sure that they're parenting themed. And
Yes.
For this month, we're actually giving away a copy of her book. If you go to our website, which is athomedad.org, you can find all the information that you need. Sign up for the newsletter so that you'll get information about our book giveaways and that type of thing if you wanted to check the book out. Otherwise, you can find it on Amazon.
Yes, indeed.
and all your local bookstores, I'm sure.
Yes. Well, so as not to be too boring to your listeners, I mean, I presume people would have questions and don't want to hear me rattle on for a while. I'll just tell you, like, basically the book is divided into three sections. The first is how did we get here, where sports are so intense and, nonstop and out of proportion. The middle section is the consequences of that shift. And the final section is, well, what are we going to do about it? So I think, most people are kind of curious about, well, how did we get from, you know, when I was growing up, maybe when you were growing up, my parents were all in favor of athletics and said, go have fun, go play catch. You want to join a team? Great, I'll drop you off. You have your weekly game, half a mile from home. And that's that. And good for you. We applaud it. But meanwhile, let's get on with life. You got to be a good student.
Yeah. I mean,
And
when I was growing up, again, the weirdest things stick in your memory. At 51 years old, I still remember that I played fourth ward soccer. Was the little local division that we had, and I mean, again, it was just like you said. We practiced maybe one afternoon a week, and then
mhm,
would get together on Sunday and play whatever local team was there, and
right.
some parent would bring an ice chest full of like Gatorade and orange slices.
Yep.
And yeah, there were kids that were way better than I was. I mean, I was not a team sports player growing up. I was a Dungeons and Dragons kid.
hmm
I got involved in athletics a little bit later in life. I began competing in martial arts, which also became very much money involved as when
Oh,
I was a
yes.
kid.
hmm
But it wasn't that big of a thing. Like, you had your local league that kids played in over the summer, and then other than that, it was just, school sports
Yes. Right.
in like junior high and high school, and that was it.
Yeah. Well, and I think you always want to be careful. I think when you're talking about how things have changed, like, oh, back in the good old days. I mean, I don't want to make that a case that things were so great back then
No,
because
they were.
they weren't. And there are some drawbacks to that way of doing things as well. But I guess I would argue that we have gone too far in the other direction, and for reasons that I think many people don't realize. One is that there's a lot of money. Youth sports have become a giant industry. The Aspen Institute reported last year that parents spent 30 to 40 million, I'm sorry, $1 billion a year on youth sports.
Good Lord.
It's and there's a lot of not it's people parents are spending this kind of money in part because the public opportunities, the public, parks and recreation programs, public teams have, disappeared or diminished greatly and been replaced by private entities. And, they're filling a gap. And then on top of that, you have greater demand after Title IX. So suddenly more girls are playing. So as the public opportunities shrunk and the private stepped in, that created, it was pay to play, became more pay to play. And
Yeah.
on top
I
of that,
mean, the figure in your book that you quoted was an estimated $19.2 billion industry,
yes,
which
right.
is which is a higher value than the NFL,
Well, and
which is just insane.
yes, and uh, since my book came out, the research group Wintergreen has upped that to now. They're now say it's a $28 billion industry. Now, I think a lot of the numbers we have to view with some skepticism because it depends on how you define youth sports. How do you define play? All of the statistics that are bandied about vary a lot. But I think we all know people who are spending a lot of money on youth sports, on their kids' athletics. And the Aspen Institute also, in a separate study, found that the parents spend an average of $883 per child on their main sport. Now that can go way up depending
Right.
on family and the family assets. So,
Yeah.
you know,
And,
but
and
it's
it seems very much that this gives a further advantage to families that have the privilege of having that excess money in their
Yes.
budget to be able to spend more.
Yes. So, what we have now is basically a class-based participation model. So in households with $100,000 or more, 70% of kids are playing sports. In households of 25,000 or less, 31% are playing sports. So it's just, it's very obvious that if you can afford it, you can play. If you can't afford it, you probably can't, or it's going to be it's going to be a much greater struggle. And then those kids who have been playing for so long are obviously going to be advantaged when they go to school because the teams, they're most likely going to be better at whatever sport than the child who just is introduced to it in seventh grade. So we have a class-based system of sports, and there's a lot of people making money off your family. That's one point I always want to get across. So be wary. The second is the stakes have changed so much for children. The stakes have changed, and the nature of childhood and what parents expect of their children has changed so much. It goes hand in hand with this difference in, goodbye, have a good day, kid, go play, come back in time for dinner, to now where everything is within so many households, it's structured and organized and there's no downtime. That is also a function of larger, cultural factors and socioeconomic factors like in the recession in the 70s, the shrinking of the family, so that now households typically include 2 children rather than 4 on average, and also an exaggerated fear of stranger danger. So a variety of factors are at play here that have made children move, as Jennifer Senior said, from our employees to our bosses. There's just been a shift in parental views towards children, what we owe them, and then what we get from them in return. So parents, I think many parents would own up to the fact, if they're really being honest, that their children's accomplishments or failures feel like a reflection on them. And I'm sure this has always been true to some extent. Obviously, our parents were proud of our kids and all that, and maybe somewhat mortified if they end up doing something, they go in jail or whatever. But it's a more exaggerated now, in part because of these changes about family size and how there's so much rolled into the parent-child relationship that wasn't there before. And the third major change is college. Changes at colleges, changes in college sports have made the prospect of a scholarship or, the very unlikely, I should add, possibility of getting an athletic scholarship to offset tuition or getting into a college than you might otherwise get into. For these, it's the money, the stakes, and college that have really kind of altered the way youth sports. That's why they're not the way they were when you and I were growing up, because the whole culture has changed.
Well, and again, a lot of the culture of parenting has greatly changed. I graduated high school back in 1990.
Mm-hmm.
I think the first time anyone ever spoke to me about like going to college or, what path of study I wanted to follow in life was probably not before I hit high school.
Mm-hmm.
Was the first time that anybody started pushing the idea of you need to think about what you're thinking of doing in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And, these days parents are encouraged to make every decision based on giving your child all the advantages possible for them down the road. And I get it. I mean, I want my kids to have all the advantages that they can too.
What's interesting, of course, your parents felt the same way. My parents felt the same way. Of course, they wanted us to do well, but it wasn't. The answer wasn't the same. The answer that our parents had was not to, indulge in what the sociologist Annette Leroux calls concerted cultivation, to cultivate every minute possible interest, take them to Kumon classes and let's learn Mandarin and how about some Arabic and, fencing, whatever you can afford, the sky's the limit because we need to set you up to succeed in the world. And parents are so anxious about their kids' prospects. They're anxious about the state of the world, which, I also understand. But I think that's one of the shifts that has led to this kind of, okay, you're 4 years old. What are you doing to prepare for your future? And why you have in my town, Summit, New Jersey, we have, soccer programming. It's junior pre-academy for U4s. I'm always making fun of this because these are 3-year-olds. Soccer training for 3-year-olds. It should go without saying that 3-year-olds do not need training from a coach. They need to play.
I was going to say, at 3 years old, I'm honestly, I'm not sure that my kids could like kick the ball.
Well, and the idea that this is some kind of, head start they're going to get. It's all about kind of getting a little bit of an edge, like that's a tiny bit more prepared than their peers. So that'll give them the edge. They'll be the ones that will be picked for the travel team. They're the ones that will be selected for the varsity team and perhaps for college. It's all this kind of outcome oriented, extremely outcome oriented, rather than just, okay, let's go play soccer. Let's go have fun, run around. Maybe you'll develop a love of the sport. Maybe you'll find it fun and want to keep doing it because it's fun. Not because, practice is Saturdays from 9 to 10 at the field 20 minutes away.
Right. Now, a couple of things that you just brought up that caught my ear. Again, my kids are relatively young. My oldest just turned 9,
Mm-hmm.
and my son is 6. My oldest is my daughter Lily. Neither one. Well, my son recently expressed an interest in one sport, but certainly not one of the big money sports. Like he's started taking archery lessons at 5 years old because he wanted to shoot a bow and arrow.
Yep.
But they've never really been involved in the team sports or anything like that. And you mentioned a travel team.
Mm-hmm.
I have heard this term. I've heard people talk about it. I personally don't know what that is.
Okay. Well, a travel team is generally a private organization. It's an organization, like in my town, it's the Summit Soccer Club. There's every sport just about has them. And this club organizes teams for the different grades after you've gone through the junior pre-academy at U4. There's the pre-academy, then the academy, then finally travel soccer, which is around 5th grade. And at that age, the clubs divide the kids into, they have tryouts and they pick which kids are, sufficiently talented to be on the A team. And then those who are not quite as good, they're on the B team. And then the big fat losers on the C team. And then these kids go travel on the weekends, typically, to other towns, perhaps an hour away. They travel, play against another team rather than play locally or against a team at a neighboring town, typically. And that's just this one particular example. There are so many different types of travel teams. Some kids at higher grades travel across the country to play, depending on the sport. In AAU basketball, the most competitive teams, they travel around the country. So there's all different levels of it, but the basic commonality is that you're not just stuck playing against the local schmoes who aren't good enough. You're typically plucked out of your town according to so-called ability as assessed by the coaches, and then play kids from other communities who are also supposedly the best or the second best or whatever.
Right. So I can imagine that creates a much larger expense versus dropping your kid off at the local soccer field down the road
Yes.
when suddenly now I have to figure out how to get my child from Durham, North Carolina to Charlotte,
Yes.
which I mean, granted, that's only, you know, 2.5, 3 hour drive, but that's still a significant dedication of time and or money.
Yeah. Travel is the most expensive, on a accounting sheet. That's the most expensive feature of youth sports for parents, because many times they're tournaments a weekend away. So, there's a hotel room required, and driving many hours. So there's gas and there's hotel and there's meals out. I mean, it adds up. It's significant for a lot of families.
Yeah. I mean, again, as I mentioned, when I was young, I competed in martial arts, specifically with the United States Karate Association, now Karate Alliance. I think they had to change the name at some point. But again, it was a very different time. It was the 80s. My parents would drop me off at a gas station where my karate instructor would meet us. We'd shove like 6 kids in the back of his van, and we would drive 6 hours to get to another town where we'd go crash on the floor at one of the other karate instructors' houses,
Yeah, that's
and
not
then
going to
go
happen now.
compete on Saturday and come home.
Yeah.
Um, in today's environment, I don't see a lot of parents being that comfortable with that idea.
No. Well, and it goes to, Lenore Skenazy's movement, the free range kids movement, to try to get us away from this idea that children need to be constantly supervised, the way to be absolutely under a parent's microscope at all times, that we need to know where they are, what they're doing at all times to keep them out of harm's way. And so much of the way you describe your experience in martial arts, that's not going to happen today because there's way too much anxiety. There's so much worry about their kids' safety. And I'm a parent too. Obviously, I wouldn't perish the thought of danger with my kids. I'm sure we all feel that way, but it's absolutely out of proportion to the reality. And there's a cost that comes with that we don't really talk about, with the excess supervision, the excess kind of hovering and controlling is really doing our kids a disservice. And youth sports are attached to that because seems like a pretty good way to keep them busy and keep them safe if they're with a coach after school, or it all kind of ties together.
Yeah, I mean, and I can definitely see where, there would be concerns. I mean, Lord knows anybody who keeps track of the news knows that we've seen the scandals that have happened with coaches in different sports and the rest of it.
Yes.
Um, Again, I think at the end of the day, it's up to each individual parent um, to make those decisions. I mean, my parents met my karate instructor, they knew him. They felt comfortable enough with him to let me go. They also, more importantly, felt comfortable enough that they knew that if inappropriate things were going on, I would tell them.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they trusted me to report to them if something shady happened.
Yeah. Well, and what has happened with sports, because the stakes seem to be so high. I emphasize seem because very few kids are going to go on to play in college, let alone professionally. So why this is so important, I think it's really, I would encourage parents to reflect very seriously on why we're doing this and what are we hoping to gain. And, instead of just accepting it as an article of faith that kids need to play intense sports all the time. They don't. And that comes from someone who's a big fan of athletics and participant. But now I lost my train of thought. That was all a wind up to your question. Anyway.
Oh, the idea about the fact that, in this day and age, with, as you mentioned earlier, the constant stranger danger fear,
Yes.
this constant idea, or this feeling that permeates our culture, that our kids are constantly at risk.
Yes. Yes.
That any minute now, some predator is going to swoop up
Yes.
and, at the end of the day, as parents, we have to make decisions. And I see less parents being willing to trust people with their kids these
Yes,
days.
yes. Well, and I think we have to recognize that there's a trade-off. If you think, better safe than sorry. I think that's kind of like better safe than sorry. Keep tabs on them, make sure that every adult has, had a background check. There's a cost to that, which is that kids are afraid. They're afraid to talk to people. They've been taught, at some of the messaging that my kids got when they were in school about don't talk to strangers. Like this is just, I think, really kind of terrible and set them up to be so distrusting and anxious themselves. And now look, lo and behold, we have a, mental health crisis with kids. 42%, I think, feel persistently sad and hopeless, according to the CDC. So anyway, I think where I was getting at with the, you had mentioned that you would tell your parents if
Right.
that your parents trusted you to tell them if something was off about the coach.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the paradoxes with sports is that because the stakes are so high, the more competitive the league, the more competitive the program for the athletics, the more likely the kids are to be verbally and perhaps other types of abuse. And I use abuse as one of those words that can be expanded to include things that are like
Yeah.
getting yelled at. I don't mean that kind of abuse. Their kids are more apt to be put in difficult situations with a nasty, harsh coach, higher level they are, because the stakes seem too high. So those kids might be reluctant to say to their parent, this coach screamed at me and told me I'm an idiot today, that I suck. And I felt terrible about it. Well, it's the parents are more apt to say, well, this, you got to suck it up. This is the price you pay. You're at a high level now. So it's just it's just an irony.
But is there another option? I mean, are there less intense sports leagues? I mean, is there a place that I can sign my son up to just go play soccer and have fun,
Yes. Well,
where it's
yeah.
not going to be at that level?
Well, this is one of the problems in the youth sports environment, in that because there are so few or many fewer public type low cost options, it kind of drives parents into this more competitive. It's like you don't have a choice. There are some options, there are the YMCA's, the Boys and Girls Clubs. There are also like nonprofit clubs in towns, like in my town, but I'm in suburbia. There are like low key sorts of things. But this is where I think schools really play an important role in providing those, not varsity teams, but offering kids at schools intramurals, club sports, so that they can play. Point is that they play, that they get to move around and compete if they want to, but not necessarily at the expense of everything else in their lives. And I really sympathize with parents going through this, looking for like sane options. And it's just going to take a lot of legwork, depending on where you live, and trying to find those outlets, sort of, moderate outlets. And then if you can't find them, consider starting one, aligning with other parents who like, look, we don't want to do this crazy stuff, but I want my kid to know how to swim. Or I want my child to know how to play, like enjoy soccer, say, or whatever the sport, tennis, basketball. If there's a way to align with other parents, I think that's, that we can't wait for a top-down answer. I think that's probably
Yeah.
not going to happen. So you got to find a way to build it yourself. Look for the ones that are out there that already exist and try to build one yourself.
Okay. Well, I mean, we're very lucky. Our kids go to a public school that is literally half a mile from the house.
Mm-hmm.
I walk my kids to school and go pick them up and walk them home every day. But one of the things that their school does is they have a clubs program,
Mm-hmm.
where I think it's for the kindergarten through second grade, it is like a 45 minutes a week And for the third through fifth graders, it's, I think, a full hour.
That's
But
nice.
these are all volunteer led clubs. They're either led by teachers or some parents. And there's been all kinds of them. There's been a running club in the
That's
past.
great.
This year, one of the other dads who's a big sports fan has started the school's own flag football club.
hmm And this
You
is
know,
elementary school,
yeah,
right?
this is elementary. This is kindergarten through fifth grade only.
Yeah. So if you can work, like the school found a solution here, like
Yeah,
interested parents could try to do such a thing at their kid's school, try to offer to volunteer,
yeah.
get some teachers who might want to stay, poor teachers, they have so much on their plates, but if some would be
Well,
willing to
believe it or
stay for
not,
after school,
they've scheduled this to happen during school hours.
that's amazing.
This the last time I led a club, I actually did a club where we were teaching the kids traditional Middle Eastern drumming because
Uh-huh.
it's an old hobby of mine from back in my college days. And I was working with the kindergarten through second graders, and I want to say it was Thursdays from like 11 to 11:45.
That's terrific.
They just took one of the one of the, whether it was going to be art or music or whatever class that they were rotating through at that point, and they just put in clubs,
Yeah, that's terrific.
and so like nobody had to stay extra. For the teachers who weren't volunteering, they got an extra like 45-minute block that they could do work, grade papers, actually catch
Right.
up on their workload.
Yeah, yeah,
However, like you said earlier, the security around it is pretty tough. I mean, our
yeah,
school district requires a yearly full background check for me to
yeah,
be allowed even in the school to assist in the lunchroom.
yeah, yeah. It's
Which,
tough.
I mean, again, I understand the reasoning behind it, and I don't mind submitting myself to let them do the background check. Luckily, the school district covers the cost.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just a matter of putting your information in on a website, and 3 days later, you get something that says you've been cleared. You're good for a year.
It's just another obstacle, is all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. Now, one thing that I was going to ask about, because again, it's a topic that comes up a lot among both the community of the National At Home Dad Network and honestly, just the other dads that I know from my kids' school.
hmm
And that is, what advice do you have for the parents who feel this obligation to go all in on sports? They feel this, you feel this genuine fear of letting our kids down by not giving them every advantage. And then the next question is, at what point is it okay for your kid to quit?
Mm-hmm.
Because
Okay.
I've heard so many people talk about the fact of, well, he started soccer and he's really not enjoying it, but I want to make him stick it out. And while part of me understands the discipline aspect of it,
hmm
you need to keep your word and do what you sign up for. At the same time, I don't want to force my kids to do something that makes them miserable.
Yes, I know. Yeah. Okay, well, let's first go to the parents who are reluctant because they are reluctant to resist because they think they're going to put their kids at a disadvantage. I think, okay, it is my firm belief that we parents have no idea what we're doing. We're making it up as we go along. We have our own parents as a guide. Maybe we read some books and, get advice from Dr. Spock or whoever, depending on the generation you're in. There's plenty of books. And we also look to our peers. What are our
Hmm.
peers doing? And in my neighborhood, all the peers, my younger peers are, it's all about sports. So, if you're a sort of like questioning parent or you're not positive you're doing it right, you think, well, it doesn't seem right, but what do I know? Like, what do I know? All these other people are doing it. I think that I really encourage parents to trust their gut on this. If it seems like, gosh, does my 4-year-old really need soccer training? That seems so early. Your gut is right on that. They
Hmm.
don't need it. And to work to resist the pressures that insist that this is necessary. It is not necessary. What's necessary is play. And, I'm all for movement and exercise. It does not have to be in this structured environment. Now, if your kids are dying to do it, that's different. But the idea that you as a parent have to, make sure you sign up for this and that for your 5-year-old or your 6-year-old because they're going to miss out. That's just, that's not, they're not going to miss out, or what they're missing out on is not so great necessarily. Sometimes it is if the kid is really into it. I think all youth sports reform organizations, they have the bottom line is you let your child drive the bus. They're the ones who determine, they want to play soccer. You can introduce them to all kinds of things. They may not, obviously, they don't necessarily know about Taekwondo until you show it to them, but you let them guide what they want to play and how much they want to play. And it's that it is not coming from you saying, oh, you really, if you want to step up, if you want to try to make the the 7-year-old travel team, you better step up. That's not the right approach. It's just going to either turn them off the sport. It's a short-term fix for something that's going to blow up in your face down the road. At the same time, I also understand that some, kids need a little push sometimes. They're not just going to think they get discouraged or they want to quit, right away. And so you don't want to say, okay, fine. You don't like soccer today, or the coach said something you didn't like, or kid was mean to you, so you want to quit. You don't want to just go along with that. I think my advice about quitting is, well, first of all, as an aside, in Norway, which has like the ultimate model for youth sports, where 93% of kids participate, they have a children's Bill of Rights. It's a totally different model, like it's all public, they have a children's Bill of Rights in sports where kids, if they don't want to go to practice, they don't go to practice. They don't want to play, they don't play. It's all about what the child's interests. And meanwhile, these kids, by the way, they have a fantastic record in the Olympics. So it translates down the road to great athletic excellence. I'm not saying we're going to do that here. We can't, it's way too utopian for us.
Yeah.
But as far as quitting goes, I say that because part of me thinks that if they want to quit, just let them quit. I think if it were my child, I'd say you got to finish the season. I understand, maybe you had a change of heart. Maybe this coach isn't great. Team isn't gelling, whatever. Your best friend's on another team. Just try to hold on through the season. I understand. And we'll reconsider next time. It comes time with soccer season again, which maybe it's in 3 months because so much year-round play. Let's reconsider that. But let's not quit right now. I think it's a much harder, the quitting question or debate is really harder for families where the child has been playing for a long time. Maybe they started playing soccer at 5, and now by age 12, they've been playing soccer for 7 years, including 5 years of travel soccer, 2 seasons a year, summer soccer, and the child wants to quit because they're sick of it. In that case, it's really hard as a parent because you get invested in maybe you're sick of it, maybe you're sick of the driving. If it were me, I would have been. But you can also get really attached to their identity as a soccer player or a swimmer or a runner. It's like, oh, don't quit. They really should be calling the shots. The kids should be.
And I can also see, and I mean, again, we have a large community of dads like myself that are full-time stay-at-home dads.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that is a common problem that stay-at-home dads run into is isolation.
Yes.
In general, as men age, their circle of friends just shrinks and shrinks the older that they get.
Yeah.
And as we age, we find it more and more difficult to find new friends. And when your kid gets involved in like the travel team or something, I could easily see where the parent would become invested in, hey, these are my friends now.
Yep. It's
because
like
these
instant
are the people
social group.
I see every weekend.
Yep. Yep.
On top of, the financial investment that you've made.
Yes. And, I guess I I understand that, and I don't doubt it. And a lot of my son's teammates, their parents became our friends. We saw them a lot, and they're nice people, and
Hmm.
you kind of have this same pursuit. I think it's healthier, all things being equal, for parents to have to be to separate from that somewhat, so that your own identity and well-being is not attached to what your child is doing. Because if your child knows that, oh, dad really loves my travel team but I hate it, I better not quit because dad loves it, that's not helping your child. So you're doing it in spite of your child's
Yeah,
interest.
and it's not going to help your relationship with your child. I mean,
So
everybody at some point or another. I mean, I can only speak for myself, but Lord knows that there were points in my childhood where I resented my parents.
of course.
And I'm
Yeah.
sure that there will be points that my children resent me, but I'd like to minimize those as much as
Yeah.
I can, you know?
Yes. Yeah. And to to work to develop your own adult relationships that's separate from your kids. This is something that's kind of gone by the wayside a little bit too, as we've gotten so wrapped up in our kids' lives. Like, well, I think one of the bits, I have a bit in my book about modeling a happy adulthood, because you know when we are so in our lives are so intertwined with our kids, you're kind of signaling to your children that, adulthood's kind of boring. Here I am your little servant, driving you around or chaperoning you here and there, and I will sacrifice all my interest for your interest. It's like life ends once you have a child. It's kind of, that's what the message you're sending, and it's not. I don't think it's intentional, but from a child's point of view, it's like, wow, why would you want to grow up?
Yeah. No, I mean, I can definitely see where a kid could see it that way. So obviously, you know, we have a situation that started off as a good idea.
Hmm.
You know, as the budgets were shrinking down and the opportunities for kids to get involved in sports, the public options were getting less and less. We had people step in and create another option.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, in some ways, kind of grown out of control.
Hmm.
So the question becomes, as parents, how do we reel this back in? What can we do to help make it better?
Well, depends on how much energy you have, what your appetite is, how upset you are, or desperate for a different approach. And I wish that the incentives were different. I recently wrote an article for Inside Higher Ed with a colleague on, wouldn't it be nice if we did away with athletic scholarships and admissions advantages, because I think that is driving this. It's driving, at least for some parents, the idea that there's this, reward at the end. If that were gone, I think it would restore some sanity. Um, in the absence of top-down change, and some government body or state body, or, coming in to regulate, I don't see that happening. Unfortunately, I think it has to come from parents who, first of all, look hard at how they're doing things in their own family. Say, you know what, I know this is the norm, the norm is kids play sports incessantly, and it's just, an article of faith, but we're not doing it that way because it's not good for you, child, and it's not good for our family, and it's not good for my partners in my relationship. So we're gonna scale it back. So I think it starts at home, and then I think the next step is to find other like-minded parents. The New York Times columnist David Brooks has a term for this, the brutality cascade, which is where the most brutal player sets the terms of play, and that's kind of the way youth sports are, and everyone else feels like they have to copy. So to fight against this, you first of all establish your own norms and boundaries, and then you find other parents, and you have your own kind of set of norms that you're going to follow. Okay, us, say it's five families. We're not going to do we're not going away on Sundays. Sorry, we're not playing games on Sundays or whatever day you want, Saturdays. Um, we're sleeping in. We're not traveling. For us, at least when they're in, let's set a minimal limit of elementary school, we're not doing the travel teams. We're just going to play.
Hmm.
And so kind of forming networks of people who are resisting. And, it's not really a sacrifice. I mean, it seems like it because you're resisting the norms, but it's makes for, in my view, a better life. If
Well, and that was gonna be the next question I was gonna ask is, I know that I assume it's different for every family, but at some point, at what point does it become too much? I've got a circle of dads that, for the last 6 years, we've been getting together on Tuesday night and playing games.
uh-huh.
Largely, we get together online and we play Dungeons and Dragons like you used to on the table with dice and everything, only it's all computerized now.
Hmm.
And last Tuesday, one of the guys bailed because it was 9 o'clock at night and his kid was still playing tennis.
Hmm.
By the time they got home, it was close to 10. Child still had to shower, do some homework, get to sleep, and be at school the next day.
Hmm.
Um, Again, it's hard for me to grasp or make judgments on this because, I mean, he's got a kid in high school.
Hmm.
My kids are 9 and 6. If it's past 9 o'clock, they've already completely lost their minds and melted down.
Yeah.
So to me, that just seems absolutely ridiculous that a
Hmm.
child would be playing sports that late at night on a school night.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
Well, they're not set up to, the sports are not arranged to accommodate families. You know, like the scheduling is like, well, we have a block, we have an hour between. My nephew used to play lacrosse on Sundays at like 9:30 p.m. Practice because that's when the facility had space. So, you have to understand that they don't really, these organizations, they don't care about your family. That's another like sad truth. I'm not saying they're bad people or they're mean or they're cruel or they don't care about your child, but they're not, your family is not their interest. So I think, parents have to safeguard that themselves because they're not, that's not their interest. They come at it from a totally different perspective. And, obviously every family, parent and child have to make the decisions that suit them. I don't know this person and his child, but maybe the kid is really gung ho about tennis and loves to play and they found a way to make it happen and good for them.
yeah,
It's just that it's not it's not going to be that way for everybody. And
no,
it's okay to say no to it.
okay, yeah, and I think that's the biggest takeaway that I've gotten from the excerpts of your book that I've read, as well as our conversation, is that it's okay to opt out.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
at the end of the day, there aren't that many athletic scholarships being handed out. Um, Honestly, the ones that are being handed out, now granted, it's been 30 some odd years since I was in college, but I remember back when I was in college, I had a friend who was there partially with a athletic stipend. I
Yeah.
mean, not like a full scholarship, but like he got paid a certain amount of his tuition for participating, and he gave it up.
Because you didn't want to play.
After one semester. It wasn't that he didn't want to play. It was that the requirements for the amount of time that he had to put in for practice and games
Yeah.
were directly conflicting with his ability to complete his academic requirements.
Yes. Well, and you
And
can
as he
believe it's
said
gotten
it,
a lot worse.
right, and as he said it, like, I'm not good enough that I'm ever going to be in the NBA.
Yeah.
Like, I'm an okay basketball player. I did this because it got me some extra tuition money.
Mm-hmm.
But the point was to get an education and get a degree.
Yeah.
I'd rather pay back the loans later
Yes.
and get my degree than flunk out of school because I
Yes.
was spending so much time on the court.
Well, and I can tell you, right now, the NCAA puts out this study called the Goals Survey, GOALS. It's all capital letters. It stands for something.
Right.
And it's like 20, they interview like 20,000 athletes from all over in all the different divisions to get their firsthand experience. And they share how much time they spend on their, by their own measure, how much time they spend on sports and academics. Division one, which is the most competitive, where there's money, not money,
Mm-hmm.
Division three, um, they reported devoting 33 hours a week to their sport, 35 hours a week to their academics, and getting 6 hours and 15 minutes of sleep a night on average. The D3, which is less competitive, it was 28 hours a week on sports. So, it's just it is a job.
Mm-hmm.
And another really important statistic that I always, in my talks, I want to lay out there, in addition to the one that 6 to 7% of high school athletes play in college, 2% get any money at all. 0.3% get full rides. 0.3% of high school athletes. It's very unlikely. And the bottom line is sports. If you want to encourage your kids to play sports, I think it's great. Sports are wonderful. And if they like it and love it, but it should be for its developmental value, not for what it can do for you, down the road in college, or sports have the potential to be wonderful tools for learning and growth if
Yeah.
the environment is right. But it's not automatic. And um, this other like monetary rewards or an offset in tuition, that's very unlikely, and that's not the reason to play sports.
I mean, again, when I was growing up, people talked about getting your kids involved in sports. The things that were talked about was your kids learn teamwork.
Mm-hmm.
One of the big ones for me, again, because I was not a particularly athletic child, was that kids learn how to lose.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I competed in martial arts for a year and a half before I ever won anything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I went to tournaments probably once a month, sometimes twice a month, and lost at every one of them for a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
And kept going back because I really enjoyed doing it. And eventually I found my niche and I started winning, and that felt great.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I had to learn really quick how to lose first.
Yeah. Now, have you found that that's carried over to other parts of your life?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Like it's not the end of the world if something doesn't go right?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to say I'm better. I'm better at taking failure than I would have been without it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
failure is still hard for anybody to deal with.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I've only recently gotten re-involved with sports. I stopped doing martial arts when I was 20,
Mm-hmm.
because I injured myself while I was preparing to move into full contact fighting.
Mm-hmm.
And with a large injury, did a little reflection of you are not going to do this professionally.
Mm-hmm.
Stop ruining your body.
Mm-hmm.
And got away from it completely. And just recently discovered, of all things, triathlon.
Oh, interesting.
And
Mm-hmm.
have been doing that for the last couple of years. Now,
Mm-hmm.
again, I walk into every triathlon knowing I will not podium. Like, the only way I'm going to podium is if there's only 3 people in my age group. Okay, if there's 4, I promise I'll be 4th.
Yeah.
Um, I don't have any delusions. I go in, my goal is to touch the starting line and touch the finish line before somebody tells me that I'm disqualified because it's been too long. But I won't lie, there is a part of me that thinks, it would be really great if one day I could actually, like, not be in the bottom 10% of the finishers.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that's a long, hard road. You're talking to somebody who's never swam competitively, has never run, period, and
Mm-hmm.
grew up bicycling for fun.
Yep. Yep.
Who took something up at 49.
Mm-hmm.
So, we'll see what happens. I mean, granted, if I stick with it, I'm old enough that eventually there will only be two or three people in my age group.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But again, I don't lose sleep if I go to a race and, I'm not only, I'm not just last in my age group, I'm last in my age group, and there's a good 20 minutes between me and the guy in front of me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And I want to raise my kids with that same kind of mentality to understand that, there's going to be a lot of times in your life where you just don't get what you want.
Mm-hmm.
We all
Yeah.
want to win, but you're
Yeah.
not gonna.
Yes. That is one of the virtues of sports, and where it's so unfortunate, I think, that a lot of parents, calling for the heads of coaches when the teams don't win, or because they're not winning, and obviously it's more fun to win than to lose, but there is a real value for kids in, learning how to take it,
Yeah.
figuring out, okay, what do I have to do differently?
I mean,
I
this
need to
this
up
is
my
an
game.
ongoing struggle in our house with my 6-year-old.
Hmm.
He's finally coming to grips with the fact that his big sister is 3 years older than him,
Hmm.
and that we have not reached the point where you're going to beat her in a foot race.
Hmm.
When we sit down and we play board games, she's 9, you're 6. She's got a little bit more experience in life. She tends to win more often,
Yep. Yep.
and it's a struggle sometimes. As
Hmm.
we get really upset because Lily always wins.
Hmm.
And
Hard being
again,
youngest.
yeah, it's hard. Nobody wants to lose, but at the same time, as adults, we know you can't always win.
Hmm. Hmm. And losing is motivating too. It can be. It can also be demoralizing, but it
Well,
can be motivating.
it can be inspiring. A great example that I can give is this past Christmas. Of all things, my son looked up on Christmas morning and said and told me and my wife that he's always wanted to learn to shoot a bow and arrow.
Hmm.
This is the first time we've ever heard mention of this in his entire lifetime. He's never expressed an interest in this. He doesn't own a toy bow, nothing. Just out of nowhere, I want to learn to do this.
Hmm.
And we said we'd look into it, and took us almost it took us 2 months to find somebody, and then 3 months before they finally had an opening in their schedule that was willing to give lessons to a 5-year-old.
Hmm. Wow.
And we were really lucky in the fact that she truly knows what she's doing. Like, she
Hmm.
opened up with so I do hour-long lessons, but your kid is 5. I will charge you half price. I'm not doing more than a half hour with him because his attention span won't do it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great.
And I want to say we were about 3, maybe 4 weeks in of lessons, and he had started off really strong and really excited. And about week 4, he just, that interest level kind of plummeted, and he wasn't focusing, and he was just kind of going through the motions. And his teacher looked at him at the end of class and said, I think we should take next week off.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, what? He started to get upset, and she's like, I'm not mad at you. I'm not upset. But you weren't really focusing that much tonight. So why don't we take next week off and you think about it and make up your mind, do you really want to do this or not? And if you
Hmm.
don't, that's okay.
Hmm.
You just need to make up your mind because I don't want to waste your time or your parents' time or anything else.
Hmm.
And we came home and, he talked to his mom and me about it and talked about how he felt bad. And we told him, don't feel bad. This is something new. And he said he wanted to go back. And literally, since that week off, he has been focused like a laser beam at
Hmm.
class.
Hmm. Hmm.
He went from the "Are we almost done yet?" to at his last lesson, he literally asked, "Can we do one more round?"
Hmm. That's great.
But again, it's not competitive. It's literally he goes to an open range and target practices.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that sounds great.
Well, look, I do want to thank you for your time. We're hitting right at the hour mark, which is usually about as much time as most parents have to spare in a day.
Yes, yes.
I do want to thank you for your time and your effort. I encourage everyone to check out her book. It's got some great insights in it. Sports are a part of American life, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not going away,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yep.
we need to make sure that we maintain a healthy relationship with it. Um,
Yes.
I'm not sure what our next webinar is going to be in October. I'm not going to lie. The National At Home Dad Network has our annual convention, Home Dad Con, which is going to be starting 2 weeks from yesterday. Not that we're counting down the days, because we totally are. We're going to be in Milwaukee, Wisconsin for 3 days of learning and fatherhood and fellowship, and it's going to be amazing. For those of you who are going to be there, can't wait to see you. For those of you who are interested, please go to our website, athomedad.org. It's got all the information about Home Dad Con, our annual convention. It'll happen again next year. It also has links to our past webinars, information about membership in the organization, links to our podcast that Brock and Danny do, as well as a bunch of other resources for fathers, whether you're a stay-at-home dad, an involved dad, a work-from-home dad. If you're a dad who's dedicated to being a dad, there's something there for you. So on behalf of everybody, thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to seeing you again next month.